Hi, everybody. Let's see if I can get this on.
Don't look at yourself.
Yeah, I'm just primping. I just want to make sure that... Good evening. Hi, Miss Carol. Happy Friday to you, Miss Diane. I'm going to try to stay awake. I can't stop yawning. Mom's falling asleep standing there.
Try not to yawn, so then she yawns.
Yay, Danette. I'm excited to hear that you finally started that tiling scene. That's a good thing to just get in a hoop, hit the go button, and just every once in a while check on it for a thread color change. Miss Diane, what are you working on? I know Miss Carol's not working on anything while she takes care of that injured finger.
Uh-oh. What happened?
She had an incident with a rotary cutter.
Oh, no. She needs a guard. You need a guard.
Yep, Lisa told her she needed a guard. Hi, Miss Giselle. To watch my time tonight. I've got like, lots of hot dates to be on conference calls tonight. Apparently it's a happening evening. I don't have one here at the house, but Miss Carol, there is a rotary blade guard that goes on your rotary cutter, and it's got a little plastic piece that sticks out, so that hits your finger before the rotary blade does. So it's kind of a reminder to stop. So it actually is much nice. It's easier to work with than a klutz glove, because I can still have the use of my hand. The klutz gloves just aren't fitted enough for me. So that's what it is. So I've got to get some. I think I have to get some more 45s, 45 millimeter guards in. I think I still have 60 millimeters in the store, but I got to get some 45s back in. For those that are here, I'll tell you, the 2-inch finished easy piecing grid is back in stock. So if you were waiting for the 2-inch finished, it's here, and it's ready. So it's back in stock, as well as the border panels of Easy Piecing Grid are there as well. So I'm hoping to be able to do a little live update, just so that you can see what the border piecing grids are and what sizes and options and things that there. So that arrived. Aurifil thread is back in stock. That arrived today. So there's black, white, and grays are all back. So, and we have elastic, but I will tell you in a little bit all about elastic. Please do not call or text or email or get in the car and come. There'll be a whole separate post that comes up about elastic here. But I'll tell you guys that it is, because I'm probably not going to make it announcement until Monday morning, but you'll get the little sneak peek. So I'll talk about it at the end here this evening for you so that you can have maybe a little heads up on elastic. We are going to open tomorrow. Should you need anything, we will be open from 9:30 to noon. And at noon, I'm leaving. I'm not staying around. I am not doing any more work. I am not going to continue to wait for somebody to come pick something up. I'm leaving at noon. I am tired and have got to regroup and get myself together because the Kimberbell Day at the Fair event is going to happen virtually from everybody's home at the end of next week. So I need to
Get these packages mailed.
get 36 kits packaged and mailed on Monday for everybody. So and then get thread lists, and I got stabilizers and everything that have got to get cut and shipped out to everybody. So I need to come home and do that in peace and quiet and not hear a phone ringing or a text ring or emails dinging for a little bit, so I can get a little bit more done if it's uninterrupted fun. So let me see, what time do we have?
7:03.
All right, 7:03. Let's get started here. All right. Yes, Kelly, I can cut you some more paper hexagons. I think I have some cardstock in the cabinet, so I will pop that on the AccuQuilt and go ahead and cut you some more hexagons so that they'll be ready for you. That's no brain power work. We're going to talk this evening about sergers / overlockers. You will hear me use those two words simultaneously and changing in and out of them, so because they pretty much mean the same thing. And I'm going to try to stop moving this camera. I know I'm going to touch my face. I'm sorry.
Don't touch your face.
A serger and an overlocker are the same thing. It's just a matter of what side of the Atlantic you're on. So in Europe, they're referred to as one thing, and in the US, they're referred to as the other. And right now, I think it's a serger in the US and an overlocker in Europe. But they do the same thing. So what you see on the insides of your commercial clothes and things along that on finishing your seams is a serger is that does. A serger is the machine that does that type of stitching. So that is going to be the type of machine that you use. A serger does not have a bobbin. It has 4 threads that can be used on the machine at one time. It has 2 that function off for the lower half of the stitching and 2 spools that work off the upper half of the stitching that go in the needles. So what I want to do tonight is I want to just cover some basic threading and tips and things on an overlocker that you may know, you may not know, especially if you don't own one. Yes, I am going to be doing them on the current new Bernina L460 that is on the market now. And I know Miss Kathy Vetter has hers and she loves it. So I'm going to be working on that model. Many of you have an older or previous edition Bernina. You may also have another brand, a Singer, a White, a Baby Lock, all sorts of them. They pretty much all are going to thread about the same way. They may look a little different, but they all have upper loopers, lower loopers, left needles, and right needles. We all have the same functions of being able to adjust things, so the information is good across the board, okay? Don't forget how everybody gets an owner's manual with their machine, so if you have an owner's manual, I'm sure there's some sort of threading information or threading chart that's there. The biggest key to remember in threading a serger is there is a specific order in which you should thread. And yes, it can make a difference if you don't thread it in that order. I don't know how the machine knows that you didn't thread the upper looper first. I don't know. I don't question it. I just do it because they tell me that's the way it should be done. So first, let's talk about needles in a serger. Now, Bernina overlockers use the same needles as a domestic sewing machine does. So it is not a special needle used in our overlockers. If you have another brand, make sure that you read your manual or look in your manual, because it may not take the same needle that you have for your machine, for your sewing machine. It may be different. In a serger, you should not use a needle that is larger than a 90. Okay? You can use anywhere from a 70 to a 90. Okay? Nothing bigger. When you get over a 90, the diameter of the needle is too large to pass between the upper and lower loopers to make a proper stitch. Okay? So 70 to 90 is plenty on your serger. The other thing on a serger is we typically use a serger thread, okay? Overlocker thread is usually polyester, which is just fine if you're serging cotton fabric, okay? We use polyester. It's a much finer, lighter weight polyester and a lighter weight thread so that it doesn't build up, because remember, you've got 4 spools in some stitches. Oh, yes, Miss Kim, I didn't do my nails, and I finally did lose the one red thumb. So, sorry for that side path here. The polyester thread, it's thinner, it's lighter, because remember, you've got 4 spools and 4 strands of thread. So you don't want to use much thicker because it's going to cause thread buildup, and will also add bulk and things to your seam allowances and your garments and stuff. So that's why we usually use polyester, or we use the big cones. We use big cones. Okay. Sorry. Let me get my thoughts together here. You want to make sure that the thread that you're using is smooth. You don't want anything bumpy or anything like that. So that's why, again, just like we use in our sewing machines, you want good quality thread, because the lower quality threads are going to lint. They could fray. You're going to be serging or overlocking on your serger. It can go up to 1,000, 1,500 stitches a minute. So it's going to create quite a bit. And, we're not talking just one thread in the top and one thread in the bottom. Now you got 4. So it's like double the amount of possible thread that you can have build up in your overlocker than your sewing machine. We also typically, overlocker threads are sold on cones. And that's mostly for economy and convenience, because your overlocker is going to use way more thread faster than your sewing machine. And the loopers on your serger are going to use 6 to 10 more times more thread than the 2 needles. Okay, so that's why we opt for like big cones of thread versus small little spools of Aurifil or anything like that. On my serger, I don't always have 4 of the same color. Okay, if you don't have 4 of the same color of something, you can wind bobbins. And so I've been known to wind bobbins, and I run the needles on my serger off of bobbins. Okay, because remember, the loopers are going to use twice as much thread, or 6 to 8 times more thread. So you don't want to be putting bobbins over there because they don't hold enough thread. So if you have 2 cones, they go on your loopers, and your 2 bobbins run off the needles, if you don't have 4 spools. Now, I'm not one to have a ton of overlocker thread. It's on the inside of a garment. I'm serging fabric for washing. I am serging the edge of a sample to hang on the wall until it gets quilted. So for me, my serger is typically always threaded with white, cream, something neutral, light gray. I just don't spend the time to rethread. or have all of those threads, all of those threads, colors and 4 spools and things like that. So it just depends upon what your intent is for your overlocker. Now, there are lots of different types of threads, and in a serger, you can use thicker threads in the loopers than what you would ever use in a sewing machine. And those come into play when we do decorative stitches and decorative applications, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm going to turn this camera around, and we're going to look at an overlocker. Okay. All right. So this is your overlocker. Okay. So we have, you can hold it here. Let's get Mom's hand situated here. You can put both hands on it if you need. Okay. So you have 4 spools. Okay. And then we have 4 threading paths on an overlocker. The 2 to the far right are typically going to be your loopers, and the 2 to the left are going to be your needles. Now, Berninas are all color-coded and labeled for us. So we have the lower looper is generally, and in most machines across the brand, are usually color-coded as red. So think dirt, okay? Lower looper, red like the dirt, okay? Or red like heck. And then you have blue, which is your upper looper, which is blue like the sky or blue like heaven. Okay? Your right needle is green and your left needles are yellow. Okay? So this helps you just know what thread has got to go where. It's helpful when you first start learning your serger and trying to figure out how to balance a stitch to thread the machine in 4 colors, 4 different colors, so that you can differentiate what those colors, you're fine, stay there. You can differentiate where those colors are at and what's happening on the stitch, okay, until you figure out and learn what goes where. Some sergers or overlockers come with a trash bin, and all our Berninas and the Burnett's have trash cans that as you cut fabric off, that goes into this trash can, and then you can pop this trash can off. And then we open up the door.
Slide to the right.
Okay. So it looks really intimidating, but it's really not that scary. Okay. First, on our Berninas, you have a nice color-coded and numbered threading chart built right in here. Tells you the order that it gets threaded and all the color threading paths. And then we have colored dots all the way through everything while we thread. Okay. So when we thread a serger, we always start with the upper looper. We start in the sky, okay? You always want to make sure that your thread stand is as high as it can go. We're going to bring our thread from the back to the front. You want this spool to sit steady. You don't want it to rock and roll, so you want it to sit steady. If it's got a really big base, most sergers are going to have or come with a thread cone holder that can go up inside, and then it goes up in here, and then that just provides additional support, okay, to the spool. We're going to take the thread tail from back to front, and there's usually going to be some sort of first tension guide. It could be up from the back, it could be slid over, it could be like this style that's on our Burnett's that we would wrap around. This looks just like your bobbin winder tensioner that you have on a on your sewing machine. Just trying to go slow. So you always want to thread a serger with the foot in the up position, just like we do on a sewing machine. So we want our presser foot up so that our tension discs are all open. We're going to come forward. Now, again, like I do on my sewing machine, I hold a little bit of tension at the back and the front so that I can pull forward and make sure that everything gets into the tension discs. Now, I'm threading the blue path. So the blue path is going to come down the front. It's going to follow any blue little dot or mark. Okay, so just back up, Mom. You may need to. In the front door of most Berninas are all the tools we're going to need, and tweezers are going to be your best friend with a serger, okay? So I'm going to come up underneath my pass. This is your upper looper. Your upper looper is the one that sits up higher, okay? I have a little, typically some little type of wire loop that you're gonna put the thread through. You don't need to thread it through it. It's typically, you just kind of swing it around and it'll pop in place. And then we thread the eye of the looper, okay? And so the eye of the looper comes across and we're gonna put our thread through it, okay? And this is where a tweezer comes in handy. And I'm going to try to do this without keep sticking my hand in front of the camera. Okay. Now, once I get my thread underneath the foot, okay, I will put my thread tail to the back. And then we're going to go thread the lower looper, which is your red looper. Okay. So again, we're going to follow, let me find the thread tail, back to front, underneath, going to pull forward, we're going to follow this red dot, there's some red dots here, I'm going to come up and underneath those two clips. Now, your red looper for some older sergers is going to be the challenging looper because you would normally have to pass the thread to the left side of the machine, thread through, and then bring it back in order to get through the looper eye. Now, on today's machines, we have some looper helping that we have on the machines to help us thread those loopers. So once you get the thread to the initial spot on the looper, we're going to go ahead and thread the looper, okay, before we do anything else. Okay. So once I thread the looper, I have this little handle down here that's got a red arrow on it, and I'm going to pull it back, and you're going to see a little guy come out here. I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to loop it around that little C-clip that's there, and then we'll push that back up. And that just threaded the back of the looper for you. On the new Burnett series, the B4 series, it's going to be a little harder to see. Okay. Now, this series is a cover stitch. It's a overlocker and a cover stitch machine. So there is an extra looper in here. So for those of you with combination machines, the front looper is only used when you are cover or chain stitching. Okay. This never gets used unless you're using the purple thread guide. Okay. When you thread on a Burnett, when you go to thread this looper, you have the same lever, and you see that piece that's moving? So if you thread the eye, and then you take the thread, will be pretty much right in that little crease, and then you swing it back, it snaps, and you bring it forward, and it threads the back half of the looper for you. Okay? All right. Miss Teresa Huseman, it may be time for a new serger because I know that 35-year-old serger is going to be a challenge to thread. It's a challenge to thread that lower looper. I know it is because I have a 35-year-old serger as well here in this room, and I never rethread it. I always tie on because this is a challenge, even with Bernina from 30 some odd years ago. Actually, it's probably even more, it's probably older than 30 some odd years. So, all right, so we've got, at this point now, you have both loopers now threaded, okay? And let's see. Okay, now let's talk about needles, okay? We're gonna thread needles. So your needles, we're going to go to green. Green is number 3. Okay, that's your right needle. You're going to follow all the same path in the back. We're going to come forward, but instead of going down, we're going to come over. We're going to come up and over just like we would a sewing machine over the take. This is like your take up lever.
Green dot.
Okay, and then we thread the needle. Now, threading a needle on a serger, you usually don't have a needle threader, although the old 1100, 1150, and 1200 sergers do have needle threaders. We can use a needle threader, a standard good old needle threader on the machine, okay? Or you can manually thread it. And see, now it's not going to work now that I have all these eyeballs watching me. There it is. And then let me grab that loop with my tweezers. Okay. And then I'm going to put my thread underneath my foot. And then I'm going to do the same, just stay right there. I'm just going to do the same with the left needle. I'm going to follow all of the yellow path. And then thread the left needle. Now, you'll notice that a serger has two needles, and if you look at the needles, the left needle sits higher than the right needle. And the reason for that is because in the order, the formation of the stitch, we want this stitch to be picked up before this one. So that's why when you're putting in your needles on an overlocker, typically your left one goes higher than your right one. Okay, so it's not that you didn't get the right one up high enough. It's just formed to do it that way. Okay. Now, once you have that threaded on, I don't know about other brands, but I'm sure it's the same way. But in the newer overlockers, at least, and I say new, from my world, the last 15, 17 years with Bernina, they will not work if this door is not shut. It's just a safety feature to keep you from getting yourself caught in here. Okay, so we close the door, and then I put my trash can back on. Okay. Now you'll notice that every single thread has a tension dial. Okay, all of them have dials on them. Okay. Now, typically your machine is going to have some sort of card information or stitch information as to what all the stitches it can do. And all the difference between all these stitches just come into play with you changing settings of tension. I'm going to talk tonight mostly about a standard 4-thread overlock. So that uses all 4 threads, 2 needles, okay? And we're going to always start typically with your tensions at 4, at least on Berninas, okay? These are not always going to be the be-all, end-all. This is going to depend upon the thread you're using, the fabric that you're using, things along that line. So you want to make sure that this just gives you a good starting point for tension. What we're looking for when we serge, so let me get a piece of fabric here, Mom. Okay. And I hope this isn't going to be too loud. You can start with your presser foot down with an overlocker. We're going to lift to the front and we slide the fabric in up to the knife. Now, some of you have upper driven knives, so your knife comes down from the top, and the newer Berninas, the Burnett's, are lower driven knives, so they're down here on the bottom. So we can lift the front of our foot, slide our fabric back to the knife, and then we can step on the gas to see if we have the machine threaded correctly. It's going to cut off whatever's hanging out to the right of the knife. Cut my thread down.
Sounds good. It's quiet.
Okay. So what we're looking for in a balanced stitch is we want our upper looper and our lower loopers to match and meet right on the cut edge. Okay? So remember, my upper looper is this turquoise. My lower looper on the back is pink. And the loops form and meet right along the edge. It's hard to see, but there's my right needle. There's my left needle. Okay? My seam lays flat. Okay, there's not a lot, there's no tunneling or no loops hanging off the edge. This is the goal that you want, okay, is your seam to lay flat and everything to meet and look beautiful front and back, okay? So the next thing that usually happens to people after they get over threading it is they don't know what to do when things don't look right, okay? So this looks great from the front until you turn it over to the back and you're like, where's my pink thread? Where's my lower looper at? Okay? When it comes to troubleshooting a serger and troubleshooting a balanced stitch, you need to think of it like a seesaw. Okay? The upper looper and the lower looper, okay, so for me that's turquoise and pink, are playing a game of tug of war. And right now, looking at this from the front of my fabric, my lower looper is pulling too much. It's pulling too tight, okay? So that's why my upper looper is wrapping all the way over to the back side of my fabric. So with that being said, I can do two things. I can either take the tension on my upper looper. Okay, so I'm going to come up here. So I can either take my upper looper and increase this tension so that it pulls more on the pink, or I can come to my pink looper and decrease the tension so that it pulls less. Okay? Now, you only change one of these dials. You don't change two. Okay. So, if you start changing more than one at a time before you run another test, you're just going to cancel out whatever you changed. Because if I took both of these and adjusted them, so if I went up and went down, it's going to give me the same end result. Okay? So, when you're trying to balance a stitch, you want to change one and run a test. And when you change, it doesn't need to be giant numbers that you change. Like, don't go from 4 all the way to 8, okay? If you're just fine-tuning, a quarter of a turn is all you need. Now, this is drastic, okay? That would be a drastic turn in number. But if you're just trying to fine-tune, a little turn will do a lot. So that's upper, if you have upper looper, and the same would be if this is my lower looper coming to the front, okay? That just means my upper looper is pulling too tight or my lower looper is not pulling enough, okay? I would make one change to that. When it comes to needles, typically if you're getting gathering without wanting gathering, that usually is a needle tension issue. It means they're too tight, okay? And if you're getting stitching that looks like this, remember that yellow is a needle. So my needles are looping, my threads are looping. That usually means that there's an issue with needle tension, usually too loose, okay? So, and again, like I said, there's looping there. You can see that, okay? So I would make one change and one change only. Now, if you've got yourself balanced, but your stitch looks like, your seam looks like this, do you see all that buildup that's in there? Okay? This means that you've got too much fabric in your seam, which means that your cutting width needs to be adjusted. Means that the machine is not cutting enough fabric off for the width of the stitch. On an overlocker, you cannot, for the most part, you cannot adjust stitch width, especially if you're using both needles, because the stitch is as wide as the two needles are. Now, if I took this needle out, I could make a narrower stitch because now the edge of the stitch is only to the right needle. But I can't make this any wider. I don't have a stitch width knob or anything. We have stitch length. you can adjust, but no stitch width knobs. There is some fine tuning that we can do on newer Bernina sergers, and it's called micro thread control. So if you've got a little bit of looping sticking off, we can do a little fine tune using a little dial to adjust the width of it's hard to see, but it's this little, let me get my stiletto. This little guy right here, this little stitch finger, he moves back and forth slightly when you adjust the MTC adjustment on the serger. Okay, this is only on newer sergers, the 1300, I think, 1150 maybe, MDA. I've lost numbers, but the MTC can make that adjustment. And then if you've got loops sticking, let me get back here. If you've got your loops, your upper and lower looper are meeting on the edge, but just not on the edge of the fabric. That means that you've not left, your cutting width is too small. You're cutting too much fabric off, and you need to increase your cutting width. The cutting width, again, refers to the position of the knife. On the newer sergers, our cutting width indicator is right here on top for us to see, and it is an adjustment that gets done here, okay? On my Burnett's, it's this knob that's here. On the previous models of the serger, it's a dial that is right inside here. Okay, there's a cutting width adjustment here. So you can play with the width of your cutting. And again, this is going to depend upon thickness of fabric. If, cutting width and what it leaves in the seam for 2 pieces of cotton is going to be very different than what you need in the seam if it's 2 pieces of polar fleece. Make sense? I hope. Okay. The other thing that we have with sergers is most of us have some sort of setting to just presser foot pressure. So the older ones, it's a turn knob. The newer ones, it's this dial. We have low, medium, high, and on the newer sergers, we have extra low and extra high. So if you are serging and things don't seem to want to move under the serger, like 2 pieces of polar fleece, or you're doing a bridal veil on tulle or something, and it's just not moving or sliding all over the place, you can adjust your presser foot pressure, just like you can on a sewing machine, okay? Typically on a serger, you also have a stitch length, okay? The stitch length knob, we go anywhere from point something, 0.5, 0.8, up to a 4 in stitch length. 2.5 is about the default, and most machines have some sort of indicator to show you where that default is. Some sergers on the market are going to have a differential feed, okay? So differential feed is this lower knob, and this is the lower knob on all Berninas is differential feed. This refers to the speed of your feed dogs. On an overlocker, see if I can show you. There is 2 sets of feed dogs. There's one on the front and one on the back. So you actually have the ability to control the speed that the machine pulls fabric in or it sends fabric out. Okay, and so this comes in handy when you're serging stretchy fabrics or fabrics that want to pucker. When we have things that are stretchy, so you're doing t-shirts or things like that, you would want to increase this number. And again, depending upon how much stretch you've got will depend upon how high you go. But this is going to force the machine to take in fabric faster so that the presser foot pressure doesn't stretch the knit before it gets to the needle, and then you get this rainbow effect. It's not pretty when your t-shirt doesn't do what you want. And then you would go to a lower number if you're if you're serging fabric that wants to pucker. sometimes like batiste or really thin fabric, anything like that. What's happening is if you're on a normal setting, the machine is pushing fabric in too fast. So we would need to slow the feed dog down so it didn't push it in too fast. We also can use this differential feed to adjust the machine to gather and things like that. So there are other reasons that we use it. On my Burnett, my B4 series Burnett's, because I know a lot of you have those. This knob on the left-hand side of the head of the machine is your presser foot pressure. I talked about cutting width. This is stitch length back here. This is differential feed back here on the back left-hand side of the serger. And then on the right-hand side of the serger, you have stitch length. Okay? So that covers those knobs that are there. And then the same threading guide and thread paths pretty much fall on a Burnett. And tools in the front covers. You have a needle threader that lives in here too. If you're not big on threading and you get it threaded once, you can always cut your tails, cut long thread tails, put your new spools on and tie knots, okay? And double, triple, quadruple knot, okay, just so it doesn't come out. And then you can step on the gas and pull those knots down, let the knots pull the new thread into the threading pass. Now, I typically will stop when those knots get close to the needles, okay? Because the knot will pass through the eye of the looper without a problem because that looper eye is big. They're not going to go through the eye of the needles very easily and possibly could break, especially if you double and triple knot them to make sure they don't come out. You can also pull the threads if you're not big on stepping on the gas and hitting go. Okay, you can pull, and that will pull those threads through as well. Okay. Do we have any questions about serging, overlocking? I use it in garment construction. I use it to serge the edges of fabrics before I wash it. I do it for roll hemming. Okay. So a roll hem is what you would normally see on, think, tablecloths and napkins. Okay. So, or if you've ever done anything with pageant dresses and whatnot, this usually the roll hem on tulle that gives you all those ruffles and frills. So that roll hem is typically, I'm going to try to see if I can't get it. It's really, really tight. And it covers, and we use, typically when we roll hem, we use a different type of thread. If you're trying to fill nice and fill, this is a flocked thread, and it's kind of like pantyhose. So when you stretch it, it's real thin, but when it relaxes, it puffs out so that it fills in the gaps a little better. Type thing. And so when you get into thicker decorative things, so this here is pearl crown rayon, which you would normally hand stitch with or anything like that, is going to end result a much thicker filled in roll hem. Okay, so that these are roll hem pin tucks. That's a variegated pearl crown rayon, so I did not start and stop each one of those colors. That's there. Okay. There's lots of things that you can do with serger decoratively. We've got lots of accessories, things along that lines. So I'm going to answer a couple questions. I'm going to hand Mom the phone so that I have both hands to answer questions with. So let me flip this back around. Okay. So,
Look at you.
yeah, look at me.
Okay.
They don't need to see the screen. So, Yes, Miss Sue Skidmore, you asked, do you loosen the tension before running the knots through? You can. If you're going to pull the threads through, you could loosen the upper tensions, especially if you feel like you're pulling really, really hard. But I was pulling these without doing any tension loosening, and it comes out. I think it just depends mostly on your serger. So it's completely up to you. But yes, you can drop the tensions all the way down to 1. Just stop when that knot gets to your needles, because otherwise you'll end up bending and breaking them.
Teresa Hughes, I don't know if she
can.
Did you see it?
I'm getting there. Miss Giselle, I will look into those needles. I'm not sure if I have that particular one, but it may be, there may be a compatible needle, but I will make a note. Give me 1 second. Yep. Let me get my pen and paper. HA1SP. Okay. I will check in the morning. How do I keep threads coming apart at the end? So, let me see if I have. Okay. So, thread tails coming apart at the end. There is a technique that you can use to secure the edges by flipping it over and sewing and serging down. I just don't like the look of it. And if I'm dealing with a lot of bulk, the last thing I want to do is flip this underneath the serger and pull this around. It's just not my friend. So, I like to bury my tails. Now, I don't bury every tail. So, for example, if I was going to serge all the way around all 4 edges, I'd do that all and then I would just be burying one tail, because when I come this direction, this is going to get secured by the next stitch. So I take, let me find just one right there. I'll come back to you. Let me find a pair of scissors. I use a double-eyed needle. So it's a double needle. It's an eye on both ends. Okay. So I take my all 4 tails. I thread it through the eye. Here, just come down here, see if I can. I'm going to apologize for the dark room. I haven't got an electrician in here to add me any movie lighting yet. Okay. So I thread the tails, and then I take the other end of this needle and I slide it through my stitching and then pull. Okay. And then I can trim the excess tail off. And to me, that just looks prettier than anything that I can do. You can also tie them in a knot very, very close to that. But for me, this is how I secure. If it's a roll hem, you can't obviously do this. So therefore, you're going to clip your tails. You're going to fray check or clear glue, fingernail polish, a clear fingernail polish before, and let it dry before you clip the tails. But that's how I would secure that. Okay, working with knits. Miss Danette, I would test with your scrap knit first to make sure that you get your differential feed right. I usually will use there is a stitch on the machine called a super stretch. It's a 3-thread super stretch stitch. So if it's a knit, I will use that versus a 4-thread, just so it still has a little bit of give, whereas the 4-thread has that extra needle in it so that it's designed not to stretch quite as much. So I would use a 3-thread. Test on your overlocker first to make sure your differential feed, your tensions are right, and do it on, 2 layers. And that way, because that's what you're going to be overlocking, would be, the 2 shirts and 2 layers. Don't just test it on 1 layer of knit. Do it with 2. Okay. Miss Teresa and Miss Colleen, I think, asked about turning the cutter off. It depends upon your serger. If you can remove or deactivate or disengage the knife. I do know that on the most of the previous Berninas, you can just pull the knife and flip it up out of the way. On the new 4 Series knives, yes, you can disengage. It just requires a little bit of a loosening a screw. The Burnett's, you would just unscrew the knife and take it off. I don't recommend it because if you get too far to the right, as you're overlocking, if you go past that looper, it's just going to cause
mess.
All sorts of mess. And Miss Stacy Scott, if she's on here, she knows what kind of mess that causes. So if you don't want to cut, just keep your fabric to the left of the knife. Don't put anything that cuts off at the right. Just let it brush right up next to the knife. It'll give you a nice clean edge without removing any of your fabric that's there. How do I change from cutting to roll hem? Come on over here. So on most Berninas, changing from an overlock to a roll hem is just a matter of flipping a switch. Okay? So this little switch right here, I'm ready to roll hem. If I want to overlock, I push it back and I'm ready to overlock. Now there's some adjustments you have to make to tension and whatnot, but it's just the flip of a switch on a Bernina. Some older models, you may actually have to take off the stitch plate and put on a roll hem stitch plate. And it's just a matter of it removes the little finger that the overlock is formed over. And it slides it out of the way so that the loops will be able to come all the way to the edge of the cut fabric and fill in like a roll hem. So it's really easy. Miss Joanne, no, most sergers don't. Your Bernina serger doesn't require a special needle. Your regular home needle, unless you're going to cover stitch. For those that have cover stitch machines, yes, you can do it with the standard home sewing needle, but you may, if you're getting any skip stitching, you need a JLX needle, okay? So the JLX needles I do have at the store somewhere. I think they're in the back in my white Bernina cabinet in the office because I don't want anybody to accidentally pick them up for regular sewing. But they are needles that are designed for cover. They're engineered for cover stitching and the way those 3 loopers and everything work. That's there. Let's see. Yes, I do sell the double-ended, double-eyed needles. Okay. Thread coming apart, double-ended, new needles. There's not really an advantage. The only reason I use a double-ended needle is because one, it's Miss Susan, it's not really sharp on each end, and if I've got a really small, short tail, I can thread that first and then put the tails through and pull through, and then I can just pick this up any direction and not have to make sure I pick it up with the thread tail, the eye in the right way. But a lot of people use just a large-eyed tapestry needle or anything like that, which would totally work too, as long as you can get 4 threads through the eye.
Don't cut your threads.
That type of thing. But, watch your hand, Mom.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Dad does need to get to work on getting me some lighting in here. Cleaning and oiling. Is just dust it out, open it all up. So when you're going to clean it, you can open it all up. You can easily take canned air if you want because you can blow it out through the machine and you're not blowing it back in. Mini vacuum cleaner attachments, things like that. You can clean out lint brushes. I use a small like trim paintbrush you can use because you can dust out, get a little closer and dust things out a little easier. Oiling on a serger, it's typically marked and it's just a drop in like 2 or 3 places. Doesn't need to happen as often as your sewing machine, but do remember this is metal on metal, okay? So you do have to oil it every once in a while. Okay. Now, let's talk. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, yes. Dad's here now with my fancy lighting. Brings me a flashlight to hold on me. Okay, the last question. Miss Danette, yes, I think the 009 cover and chain will take a JLX. I'm pretty sure that we have. And so you want to know about the new serger coming. So I'll finish up with that. There are new sergers coming. We were supposed to start talking about them this month, but because of everything that's going on, they haven't been able in Switzerland to get the factory up and running because everybody has to stay home at the capacity that they want. So we're holding off talking about it. I can tell you it is the Bernina L8 series. There is what I know of 2 models in that series. And I know that there's some sort of air thread system. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how it works. Honestly, they have told us nothing. We just know it's coming. It's supposed to be coming this fall. Hopefully that will continue to stay. I know that they were already in production before all of this happened. They're not up to where they want to be and don't want to launch it, and you guys have to wait for it. Plus, with the current way that travel and large conferences and things are, our Bernina University may not happen like it normally happens in July. So things have kind of been shifted. I do know it is an air thread serger. I'm sure it's also going to be a serger that uses a freehand system. Now, our L460 does use a freehand system, and it does use, let me get it out here, your sewing machine foot control, which means that the L460 does give you needle up, needle down on a serger. So I'm sure that the L8 series will have them as well. I don't know if it is a combination overlock, cover stitch and chain machine. I don't know if they're separate machines. I don't know if there really is 2. There could be 3. Crap, there could be 4. Who knows? You never know when we get to BU, Bernina University, as to what's going to happen. That's there. So there is that. Miss Jan, there is a JLX, as in Jackie, Lynn, and xylophone, and there also is an EL705. 1 second. I thought I had my notes for it. Oh, hold on. It's in this book. It's in the manual. There is I think an EL705, which can work as well as your standard home sewing machine needles. If you are going to use your serger a lot, I would suggest investing in the EL705 needles. Give me 1 second. I know I just read it.
Tell me, I'll look it up.
I will find it here in just 1 minute. Oh, here it is. Yes, it's EL705. So elephant light bulb 705. Sorry, I do not know my military alphabet, so you have to deal with my letters.
Echo.
Yes. That thing. So
EL.
EL705 and JLX. Oil on your serger, it does come with oil, but the same oil that you have in your sewing machine can be used as well. Okay? And other uses for sergers, there's all sorts of things. You can use a serger to make piping. You can use a serger to put in a zipper. Okay.
Sew pearls.
You can use a serger to, this is a chain stitch, a cover stitch machine, so it puts the binding on t-shirt necks. You can use a serger to hem, put in elastic.
Elasticator.
Okay. I mean, if you're into making your own panties, there it is, right there. There is the leg to a pair of panties. And that was all done with a cover stitch machine. And so when you look at a cover stitch, that's the one, just like you see on the hems of t-shirts. It's hard to see here, but it's straight stitch on top. Let me see if you can maybe see it a little better here. It's straight stitch on top, and then when you turn it over, it's a bunch of, looks like overlocking underneath. This is what you usually see your t-shirts and things hemmed with. So this is also a serger type machine. It's just, it does a cover stitch, that type of thing. So there's roll hem napkins. You can use it to put in beads. I meant to grab my necklace, that was my beaded necklace that was made with a serger. I forgot to grab and bring in here today. You can make your own wire edge ribbon, all sorts of stuff. Pretty much almost anything. You can piece a quilt on your serger.
We got a class in that.
You could do quilt as you go. You could do a pieced quilt. You just have to get your machine set up and know where it is for 1/4 of an inch if you're going to try to keep a true 1/4 of an inch. It's not something I would be piecing half square triangles and intricate stuff, but rail fences and 9 patches are very easy to be serged on a serger. It's really good for quilt as you go. You know, you've got 3, 6 layers and sections underneath, and then feed it through and then flip it out and add another. So lots of uses. There are techniques for putting binding on with a serger. Even not only sewing it. Let's see. I may not have done it here because I'm really not a fan of it. No. I sewed it by hand because I don't like my binding sewn down by anything but my own digits. But this was done quilt as you go. Okay, so you can see that this panel, and then we added this panel. So this was all done quilt as you go. This was all done on the serger, all pieced. Okay, so this is a 9 patch, a backwards kind of 9 patch, so that you could see the overlock stitch, and then it was quilted as you go around. So it's just a little overlock serger cover, dust cover. That's there. All right. I think
That's it.
I have said enough for tonight, and I have got to go and get on my other call with OESD, talk about some embroidery, some upcoming embroidery stuff. I mentioned earlier, I would talk about it now. We do have elastic, okay? So don't, hold on a second, don't be calling, texting, emailing, anything yet. You're getting the heads up. We are going to be open 9:30 to 12 tomorrow. And those of you that are on here will know that we have elastic. You can get, right now, 10 yards. We're trying to make the wealth go around for everybody. And then once I get 10 yards, if we still have it left, then I will open it back up and let you buy 10 more and things. I just want to try and get everybody some. Versus somebody swooping in and buying all
Like today.
300 yards. Please, when you do it, please do not call all your friends and have your friends call me and each buy 10 yards. I dealt with that today. Just, please, let's just share the wealth and be kind. And plus, I really don't like running credit cards for $3 and some odd cents multiple times for that. So you do. If you want elastic, please email us at materialgirl@verizon.net or send us a text at 240-527-0215 and please include your name. That phone does not have your number or contact information saved in it, and I just kind of like to know who I'm talking to. We will put the 10 yards away for you, cut it and put it aside if you're in the area and you want to pick it up tomorrow. Again, we're there till noon, okay? And then I will open it to a mass public posting on the regular Material Girls Facebook page if there is any left on Monday morning. All right. I hope the elastic, Miss Colleen, is 1/4 inch and it is white. You can, it's very hard to find black elastic, and 1/8 of an inch is
Tiny.
just as difficult to find. The store is not open. We will shop for you via text and pictures. Yes, I know we're essential and I could technically open the store. However, for the safety of me, Mom, and my staff, as well, and Dad, Dr. Mike, we have decided to kind of minimize our access or proximity to it, as well as I really can't properly sanitize every single bolt somebody has picked up. And I don't want you to come in and pick something up that somebody else had that didn't know they were sick and things like that. So this is just the safest way for me to keep all the fabric clean and germ-free.
And you're all safe.
And keep you all safe when we finally can open the doors again. So again, text, email, the pictures are all up on Facebook. They're also up on the website. If you go to the website and go to the COVID-19 procedures tab.
It says click here.
Remember, these pictures are from 412. We are now at 417, which means some of those bolts are now gone. So if you just text and tell us, we'll let you know if it's no longer available. And I'll repeat again, the text line is 240-527-0215. And this will be, it's being recorded. It'll be here inside the society group forever, for eternity, like I tell everybody. I'll be on here forever. Okay? Now,
Thank you.
Miss Jackie, I don't know anything about OESD yet, so I'll fill you in as soon as I can.
Say thank you and stay safe.
Thank you guys. Stay safe. Enjoy your weekend. And I promise I will do better again. I will try to do better again next week. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Finish.